Lucille O'Neill did not call her son. That is the first thing you need to understand about this story, and about Lucille O'Neill, and about the particular kind of strength that looks like stillness from the outside. When Raymond Kessler knocked on the door of apartment 2C at 74 Garrison Street in Newark, New Jersey, on a Tuesday morning in February, and handed her a white envelope and said, "Miss O'Neill," one letter wrong, which she noticed and did not correct, and told her she had 30 days to vacate, Lucille O'Neill took the envelope with both hands, thanked him, and closed the door. She put the envelope on the kitchen table. She made a cup of tea. She sat down at the table with the tea and the envelope and looked at both of them for a long time. Then she got up, washed her cup, put it in the rack, dried her hands on the dish towel that hung on the oven handle, the yellow one, the one she had bought at a church sale 11 years ago when she first moved into this apartment and decided she was going to make it exactly what she wanted it to be. And she went about her Tuesday. She did not call her son. She kept the eviction notice on the kitchen table. She was still keeping it there 3 days later, on a Thursday afternoon, when Shaq's asset manager, a woman named Andrea Sims, was going through the tenant files on a newly acquired Newark residential portfolio and stopped on a name. The name was on the second floor. Apartment 2C. Andrea Sims sat back in her chair and looked at the file for a moment. Then she picked up her phone. Shaquille O'Neal was in Los Angeles on Thursday afternoon when his phone rang. He listened to Andrea for 40 seconds. He did not say anything while she talked. When she was done, he said, "Say the address again." She said it. He was quiet for another moment, and in that moment something moved through his face. Not anger, not shock, something older and more complicated. The expression of a man encountering the specific consequence of a specific thing he did not do carefully enough. "When was the notice served?" he said. "Tuesday," Andrea said. 4 days ago. She didn't call me." "No," Andrea said. He ended the call. He sat with his phone in his hand. Then he made 3 calls in the following order. First to his real estate attorney, then to his acquisition team's portfolio director, and then, last, not first, which cost him something, to his mother. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, baby," she said. The way she always said it, in the voice that has never, in 52 years, made him feel like anything other than exactly who he is to her. "Mama," he said, "I know about the notice." There was a pause. He heard her in the kitchen, the specific acoustic of that kitchen, the slight echo off the tile, a sound he knew from 30 years of phone calls. "I was going to tell you," she said. "When?" A beat. "When you needed to know." He closed his eyes. "I already needed to know," he said. "I needed to know 4 days ago. You were busy," she said. Simply, without reproach. That was the moment. Not the news from Andrea, not the phone call to the attorney, not the document he would sign before noon the next day. That was the moment he would think about afterward. "You were busy," said by a woman who had raised him through every stage of busy, who had watched him acquire everything from arenas to franchises to commercial portfolios, who had never once called to say, "I need something," in a way that required him to stop and ask himself what she had needed that she hadn't said. "I'm coming to Newark," he said. "Shaq, I'll be there by morning," he said. "Don't move anything." He was on a plane by 6 p.m. But before Andrea's call, before the white envelope on the kitchen table, before Raymond Kessler knocked on the door of apartment 2C, there were 3 things in that building that had been there longer than Raymond Kessler, longer than the investment LLC that had acquired it 8 months ago. longer than the renovation memo that had landed in Kessler's inbox on a Monday morning, with a list of units on floors 2 and 3 and a directive to begin vacancy proceedings. The first was a wooden cross hanging on the wall outside apartment 3A. Small, dark-stained, hung on a single nail at the exact height a woman of 4'11" would hang something she wanted at eye level. It had been there for 22 years, since before the building changed owners the first time, and the 3 subsequent landlords had all, independently, made the decision not to mention it. The woman in 3A was named Elena Estrada, and she was 80 years old and had been in this building since 2002. And the cross had been on that nail since the day she arrived, and the understanding, unspoken, building-wide, was that the cross and Mrs. Estrada were fixed points around which other things organized themselves. The second was a handwritten note taped inside the door of the laundry room on the ground floor, in the same spot a note had been taped for at least 15 years, always in the same handwriting, always giving the same information: which machines ran hot, which machine had the slow spin cycle, which soap dispenser stuck unless you pushed the left side first. Nobody knew who wrote the notes. Nobody had asked. They were accurate. They were replaced when they yellowed. The building ran on them. The third was a photograph pinned to the community bulletin board in the lobby. The kind of board covered in cork and bordered in aluminum that every apartment building of a certain age has, and nobody tends, showing a group of tenants at what appeared to be a building barbecue. Summer. 12 or 14 people. Paper plates. Someone with a garden hose in the background. Everyone turned toward the camera in that slightly caught, not quite ready way that makes photographs honest. The photo was undated. Nobody had removed it. It had been there so long it had acquired the status of a fixture, part of what the lobby was, rather than something someone had put there. In the photo, on the right side, laughing at something off camera, was a woman in a yellow blouse holding a paper plate. Lucille O'Neill had been in this building for 11 years. She was in the photo. Nobody who looked at the lobby bulletin board every day for 11 years and had never once said who are those people had any idea that the woman in the yellow blouse was the mother of one of the most famous people on earth. That was how she wanted it. She kept the eviction notice on the kitchen table. She made her tea. She did not call her son. Now here is the part that nobody in that building fully understood. Not Lucille. Not Raymond Kessler. Not the 23 other tenants who would, over the following 48 hours, open similar white envelopes and feel the specific drop in the stomach that an eviction notice produces. Not the end of the world. Not necessarily, but the beginning of a particular kind of math that does not stop once it starts. The investment LLC that had acquired 74 Garrison Street 8 months ago, a company called Meridian Pillar Group, registered in Delaware, operating address a suite number in Charlotte, had itself been acquired 6 weeks ago as part of a commercial real estate package that Shaq's holding company had purchased from a distressed portfolio broker. 14 properties, 3 states. The package had been assembled quickly, by design. Distressed portfolio acquisitions move on timelines that do not accommodate thorough review of every tenant file in every building in every city. That was what asset managers were for. Andrea Sims was an excellent asset manager. She caught it on a Thursday afternoon, 4 days after the notice was served, which was, in the timeline of these things, fast. It was not fast enough. The renovation directive that Raymond Kessler had received, the memo that listed units on floors 2 and 3 of 74 Garrison Street and instructed him to begin vacancy proceedings, had been drafted by Shaq's own portfolio optimization team, following standard procedure on acquired residential assets with below-market rents and unrenovated units. They had not checked the tenant names against any other list. There was no system requiring them to. It was not bad faith. It was the particular failure of scale. The thing that happens when the distance between a name on a document and a person in a kitchen gets large enough that the distance feels like abstraction. His mother's name was in a column in a spreadsheet. His company had put it there. Nobody had known. He had been on a plane for 3 hours before he let himself sit with that fully. Not the optics, not the legal exposure, not the story, the fact of it. That a mechanism he had built and set in motion had produced a white envelope on his mother's kitchen table, and the sound of her voice saying you were busy without reproach, which was worse than reproach, which would always be worse than reproach. He landed in Newark at 11:40 p. M. Stay with us through the whole video. Because what happens by noon the next day is not the point. The point is what he understood in the back of a car on the New Jersey Turnpike at midnight about the difference between owning something and being responsible for it. Shaquille Rashawn O'Neal was born in Newark in 1972, and the man who taught him what a name on a door meant was not a businessman. He was a soldier. Philip Harrison was Shaq's stepfather. And he was, in the precise vocabulary of the Army, a man who understood accountability as infrastructure, not a value you performed when people were watching, but the load-bearing wall of everything else. He had grown up in Georgia, enlisted at 18, built a life around the understanding that the things you put your name on become part of you, and you become part of them, and that there is no separating the two after the fact. He used to say it to Shaq directly, in the flat. No ceremony voice he used for everything that mattered. A man's name on a door means something. You don't put your name on something you're not willing to stand behind. He said it about small things, a permission slip, a lease, a receipt signed at a store counter. He said it the way certain people say the things they mean most, not once dramatically, but repeatedly, quietly, until the sentence stopped being his and became the air. Philip Harrison died in 2013. He did not live to see the full scope of what his stepson built. He would have approved of some of it and asked hard questions about the rest. He was that kind of man. He would have looked at a 14-property distressed portfolio acquisition and asked one question: do you know who lives there? And Shaq, on a plane over the Midwest at 9 p. M. on a Thursday, with his mother's kitchen acoustics still in his ear, would not have had a clean answer. He had built an organization capable of acquiring 14 properties in 3 states. He had not built an organization capable of knowing that his mother was in one of them until 4 days after the damage was done. Philip Harrison had been right. He always was. The hardest part of the Turnpike ride was not anger and not shame. It was something quieter. The recognition that scale is not a defense, that a mechanism doesn't stop being yours because it got big enough that you couldn't see all of it anymore, that you were busy is the saddest 3 words in the English language when they come from a woman who raised you to be better than your excuses. He got to Garrison Street at 12:40 a.m. He sat in the car outside the building for a few minutes. He looked at the 4 stories of it, the brick, the lit windows, the dark ones, the entrance with the aluminum-framed door and the lobby beyond it, the bulletin board with the photograph he hadn't seen yet but would see in the morning. Then he went up to 2C and knocked. She answered the door in her robe. She looked at him. She opened the door wider. "You didn't have to fly all the way here," she said. "Yes, I did," he said. She let him in. The eviction notice was still on the kitchen table. She had not moved it. Raymond Kessler had grown up in Bayonne, 15 minutes from Newark, the son of a building superintendent who had managed apartment complexes for 31 years and who had approached the work with the professional detachment of someone who understood that the job required you to maintain a particular distance from the human consequences of the decisions you were asked to implement, not cruelty. Distance. Raymond had learned the lesson well enough that he no longer noticed he had learned it. He was 58 years old. He had been a property manager for 22 years, for 5 different ownership groups, and he had survived the transitions between them, which is the real test of a property manager's usefulness, because he was efficient, responsive, and did not allow personal sentiment to complicate professional directives. He had served eviction notices before. He served them the way you serve them when you have done it many times, quickly, professionally, without extended conversation, because extended conversation does not change the document and only makes everyone feel worse. He had mispronounced the name on apartment 2C. He had not registered that he had done it. He had gone back to his office and filed the confirmation and moved to the next unit on the list. He had not thought about the woman in 2C again until Friday morning, when his phone rang at 8 a.m., and a man whose voice he did not recognize said his name. What Raymond Kessler did not know until 8 a.m. on Friday was what he had actually set in motion when he knocked on that door on Tuesday morning. He did not know whose door it was. He did not know whose company had sent the directive he was executing. He did not know that the same acquisition that had employed him for the past 8 months had just 6 weeks ago transferred ownership to an entity whose principal would be standing in the lobby of 74 Garrison Street by 9 a.m. He had gone to bed the night before, having done the math the way property managers always do the math. Units cleared, timelines met, directives executed, and the math had added up. He had been a competent man doing an efficient job for an owner he had never met. He had not thought about the yellow dish towel on the oven handle or the cup washed and put in the rack. He had not thought about Mrs. Estrada's cross in the hallway or the laundry room notes or the photograph on the bulletin board. The building, for Raymond Kessler, was a spreadsheet that occasionally required a clipboard and a drive from Bayonne. He was in his car on the way to another property when the phone rang. He pulled over. He listened. By the time the call ended, Raymond Kessler had been still for a long time. He sat in his car on a side street in Maplewood and looked at the steering wheel and did the math again and found, this time, that the math included things he had not put in the columns. He had spoken those words in front of 2 people. Darnell from 2B had been coming down the stairs with his backpack. Mrs. Estrada's door had been open, not wide. Just the inch or two that older people in apartment buildings keep their doors. The inch that connects them to the hallway, to the building's life, to the sound of things so they are not entirely alone. He had handed an envelope to a woman whose name he mispronounced and left before she could finish a sentence. He sat in the car in Maplewood and felt the specific weight of a thing done in 30 seconds that could not be undone and could only be answered. Shaq was in the lobby of 74 Garrison Street by 9 a.m. He had slept 4 hours on his mother's couch. He had made coffee in her kitchen and looked at the yellow dish towel and said nothing. He had called his attorney at 7:30 and his portfolio director at 7:45 and Andrea at 8. He had the documents he needed. He had also looked at the bulletin board. He stood in the lobby at 9 a.m. and he looked at the photograph on the corkboard, the barbecue, the paper plates, the person with the garden hose. 12 or 14 people turned toward the camera not quite ready, and he found his mother on the right side, in a yellow blouse, laughing at something off camera. And he stood there for a long time. 11 years. She had been in this building for 11 years. She knew the machines in the laundry room. She knew Mrs. Estrada's cross had been on that nail since 2002. She had been to the barbecue. She had made a life in these 4 floors, quietly, without asking him to manage it, or protect it, or know about it. Because she was Lucille O'Neill, and she had been building and maintaining her own life since before he was born, and she did not consider it his job to supervise it. He had inadvertently threatened it anyway. Mrs. Estrada came downstairs at 9:15. She was 80 years old, 4'11", moving with the careful speed of a woman who knows how to allocate energy. She stopped when she saw him. She looked at him for a moment, at the size of him, at his face, and she did the math that people do when they are looking at a face they recognize from somewhere and are working out from where. "You are Lucille's boy," she said. "Yes, ma'am," he said. She looked at him for another moment. "She keeps your picture in the apartment," Mrs. Estrada said. "She never says who you are. She just says my son." A pause. "I figured it out from the picture. I didn't say anything. It wasn't my business." She tilted her head slightly. "Is it your building now?" "Yes, ma'am." She considered this. "Then do right by it," she said. She went to check her mail. She did not appear to feel the need for further discussion. Darnell came down at 9:30. He was 24 years old, 2nd floor, 2B, 3rd year of nursing school at Rutgers Newark, working 2 nights a week at a distribution center to cover what his financial aid didn't. He had a white envelope in his hand. His own notice, received the same Tuesday as Lucille's, and he stopped when he saw the man in the lobby, and his expression did the thing young men's expressions do when they are trying to decide whether what they're feeling is anger or something more complicated that includes anger. "You the new owner?" he said. "Yes," Shaq said. Darnell looked at the envelope in his hand, then at Shaq. "I haven't missed a payment in 2 years, he said. "Not one." "I know," Shaq said. "You won't need that envelope." Darnell held it for a moment. He looked at Shaq's face. Whatever he was deciding, he decided it. He put the envelope in his backpack. "I've got class," he said. "Go ahead," Shaq said. Darnell went. At the door he paused, without turning around. "Tell Mrs. O'Neill I'll bring the casserole dish back this week. I've had it since November." He left. The lobby was quiet. Raymond Kessler arrived at 9:45. He came in through the front door with his clipboard and his property manager's careful professional posture, and he saw the man standing in the lobby, and he stopped. Shaq looked at him. "Mr. Kessler," he said. "Mr. O'Neill," Raymond Kessler said. His voice was steady. The steadiness cost him something. They looked at each other across the lobby for a moment. Shaq let the moment be what it was, not a performance of power, not a setup for a speech. Just 2 men standing in a lobby. One of them having understood in the past 24 hours something the other had understood in the past 2 hours. Each of them carrying the weight of it in his own way. "You were following a directive," Shaq said. "Yes," Raymond Kessler said. "That directive came from my organization," Shaq said. "That is on me, not on you." He paused. "The way you delivered it, the mispronounced name, the 30 seconds, the door, that is on you. I think you already know that." Raymond Kessler was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said. "I do." Shaq nodded. "Once, slowly, the vacancy proceedings are withdrawn," he said. "All of them, all floors. I need a full tenant and maintenance review completed within 30 days. Every unit. Every system. You know this building better than anyone on my team. That's worth something." He looked at him directly. "If you want to stay on, you stay on. With the understanding that you know what this building is now." Raymond Kessler looked at the lobby. at the bulletin board, at the aluminum door, at the 22 years of knowing this building's pipes and its problem machines and its tenants' patterns that lived in his clipboard and his memory, and the particular knowledge that only comes from being somewhere long enough to stop being a visitor. "What is it?" he said. "People's homes," Shaq said. Raymond Kessler looked at the floor, then at Shaq. He nodded. Something shifted in him that was not quite shame and not quite relief, but lived in the space between them, where a person goes when they've decided to do better and are not yet sure what doing better is going to cost. "I'll start the review Monday," he said. The documents were signed at 11:47 a.m., not the acquisition, that had already happened 6 weeks ago without his full attention. These documents were different. A board resolution converting 74 Garrison Street from a standard residential asset to a community-anchored affordable housing property, with rent increases capped at 3% annually for the length of his ownership. A foundation grant to fund the building's deferred maintenance backlog. The boiler that had been running one winter away from failure. The third-floor window seals. The intercom that had not worked since 2021. And a separate letter on his personal letterhead addressed to each tenant, explaining what had happened, who had made the error, and what was being done. Not a form letter. A letter with their names on it, spelt correctly. He brought the letter for apartment 2C upstairs himself. His mother was in the kitchen when he knocked. He came in. He sat down at the table. The kitchen table, the one with the yellow dish towel on the oven handle and the eviction notice still on the corner of it. He put the letter on the table. She looked at it. "Is this the one that fixes it?" she said. "Yes," he said. She picked up the eviction notice. She held it for a moment. She handed it to him. "Then you can take that one with you," she said. He took it. He folded it. He put it in his pocket. He sat with her in the kitchen for 2 hours. He did not explain the business. He did not describe the portfolio acquisition or the optimization directive or the timeline that had produced a knock on her door on a Tuesday morning. She did not ask him to. They drank coffee, and she told him about Mrs. Estrada's granddaughter who was getting married in June, and Darnell, who had brought her chicken soup in January when she had a cold, and the laundry room note that someone had updated last week to reflect that Machine 3 now had a new problem with the rinse cycle. He listened to all of it. He filed every detail. He did not check his phone. At one point she said, without looking up from her cup, "Your daddy would have caught it sooner." He didn't say anything for a moment. "Yeah," he said. "He would have. A man's name on a door means something. He had put his name on 14 properties in 3 states and not stood behind all of them. He knew it. He was going to have to spend the rest of his ownership of those properties making sure he knew what was behind every door. That was the cost. He was going to pay it. In a 4-story building on Garrison Street in Newark, New Jersey, on a February morning with the heat finally fixed and the boiler running right for the first time in 2 winters, a woman named Elena Estrada hung her cross back on the nail outside apartment 3A at exactly eye level, because it had never actually come down, but she touched it on her way past, and that was enough. A 24-year-old nursing student named Darnell went to class and came home and returned a casserole dish he had borrowed in November. And when Lucille O'Neill opened the door, she said, "Thank you." And he said, "You didn't have to let me keep it this long." And she said, "I know," and closed the door. And both of them understood they were talking about more than the dish. A property manager named Raymond Kessler began a building review on a Monday morning and went into every unit with a clipboard and a different set of questions than the ones he had been asking for 22 years. Not what needs to change, but what is already here. And in apartment 3A, Mrs. Estrada offered him a coffee, and he accepted it, and they talked for 20 minutes about the third-floor window seals, and the intercom, and the machine in the laundry room, and he wrote all of it down. And on the corner of a kitchen table in apartment 2C, where an eviction notice had sat for 4 days without a phone call being made, there was now a letter with a name on it, spelt correctly, next to a yellow dish towel and a coffee cup, clean in the rack. He bought the building. Then he called his mother and said, "I'm sorry," before he said anything else. She kept the eviction notice on the table and waited the way she always waited, like she already knew he'd figure it out. He always did. Because she made sure of it. A man's name on a door means something. His name was on the door now. He knew what was behind it. And so should you. Drop a comment right now. Have you ever had someone wait for you to figure something out instead of telling you? Someone who believed in you enough to let you get there yourself? Tell us who that was. If this one hit different, it earned the like. You already know it. This channel is for people who understand that accountability is not the end of the story. It is where the real story begins. Subscribe. We build this every week. The next one is ready. We will see you there.